Hey, Zaka family. Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Rian Hargrave, who is the owner of Onyx Development. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on, and it's going to be a pleasure to actually hear about your journey. But before we get into that journey and where you are currently right now, could you tell us a little bit more about your background and where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Grew up in Northeast Baltimore. I went to Western High School, and after that, I went to Virginia State, where I graduated from college.
Okay, so Baltimore. Talk about the culture out there in the Baltimore district.
Yeah, so Baltimore, it's funny because after Virginia State, I moved directly to Brooklyn because I was like, I'm never going to live in Baltimore. Like, there's nothing here for me. I'm not staying in Baltimore. And it's funny because as I got older, I was in Brooklyn for 8 years and I started coming back to Baltimore a little. And I got immersed in just like the food culture. I started going out to a lot of like our local lounges. I started being more involved with business in Baltimore. And what I realized is when you ask about the culture, Baltimore is it's 62, I think it's 62% African American city. So because of that, the culture is very Black and it's very welcoming. And I had never experienced before so many people just willing to kind of help you, like in your business. It's also a really high entrepreneurial city. Like my boyfriend's from Brooklyn and he's like, well, how do people make their money in Baltimore? Like, of course, New York, we think of finance or, Cali, you think of acting. He's like, what is Baltimore's thing? And I'm like, honestly, everyone I know is an entrepreneur. And so there's this spirit of like going and getting it for yourself, because we are a Black city, we're highly disinvested in. And so a lot of us individuals have taken on some responsibility to not only improve our own lives, but, when you become a business owner, you're improving your community, you're hiring young people, time that look like you. So I would say the culture of Baltimore, it's definitely a food city. If you don't know that yet, it's definitely a city you want to come try some food. I go other places sometimes and I'm just like totally unimpressed because I've been spoiled here. And so definitely it's a food city, it's an entrepreneurial city, and it's a Black city for sure.
Now, how was the childhood growing up in Baltimore?
Childhood for me, I was very fortunate. My parents are still together to this day. And so my dad was an entrepreneur and, he is an entrepreneur. And my mom has always worked for my dad. So growing up, that's all. And not only that, I mean, I have like probably 10 or 12 cousins that work for my father to the point of like, they graduate high school and, they go straight to working for my father. And some of them are like 45, 50 years old now and have never had another job, because
okay, family, keep it in the family.
Yeah. So I was very blessed to have like kind of grow up and seeing that. And I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. But what I enjoyed about my childhood is even though I was around white people in Catholic school, I played AAU basketball and I played in inner city areas. And so it was really cool to also have, and my family is very like down to earth, like your typical, it's not a bougie family. So I was always grateful to kind of have like the best of both worlds. Like I was familiar with, going and playing basketball in some really bad areas of the city. And I had friends from all walks of life because of basketball. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a really good, diverse upbringing, I would
Mm-hmm.
say.
And what were some of the struggles you faced, growing up in Baltimore?
I couldn't think of one struggle. I really didn't. I was always well taken care of. Um, I really couldn't give you any struggles. I
Mm-hmm.
feel very privileged and blessed to say that, but um, I can't think of any struggles, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was just kind of catching the Baltimore lifestyle out there. Now, what was the passion for like real estate? Where did that come from?
So the passion for real estate came from, I would say my passion for real estate, when I moved to New York, my first job was working for a developer. And he also was a general contractor. And the reason why I was able to get that job is because I put my father's business on my resume because, I worked there every day after school.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically used my dad's construction company to put on my resume. So I got a job with a developer. And that is really where I didn't know at the time, but when I look back, that's where everything clicked. Because during that time, I also got my real estate license. So that's when I fell in love with residential real estate, I guess you could say. Like, we were working on huge buildings when I worked for the developer. And even my father, he doesn't do anything residential, he only does commercial spaces. But when I started renting out properties to people in New York, and I would get such a rush from someone saying, me showing them an apartment and them saying, I'll take it. I love this place. Like, that is what really filled me up. So I think it's just that sense of providing such a basic need, a
Mm-hmm.
place for someone to live is where that passion kind of started for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you went to Virginia State, right?
Yep.
Okay, shout out to the VA. Virginia State, good school right there. Okay, so Virginia State, like, what was like the goals? Like when you when you left Baltimore, you were like, all right, like I'm going to Virginia State. Like, what was the main thing you were focusing on? Like, whether it be on
Oh,
your academics.
I'll be honest. I have never really been that much of a school person. So, like in high school, I had a job, but I would go home every night and I would bake like 5 batches of brownies and, divide them up and take them to school and sell them every day. And then it grew to like selling chips and Capri Sun. So I was like, come to me for snacks all day. Like, I was not paying attention in high school. And then when it got to college, I wasn't paying attention either. Like, when I got to Virginia State, I didn't know how much of like a party school it really was. So I definitely got sucked in to that culture for the first 2 years. And then, I think my GPA was extremely low, like something like a 1.7, because I never went to class. And, my mother found out and really sat me down, like, you better get your stuff together. And so my junior year is when I decided to get serious. And then at that point, I'll be honest, I changed my major 3 times. And then I ended up settling on a major that was based on curriculum I like to take. So I knew I liked to read. I knew I liked to write. I didn't want to commit to an English major. So I chose mass communications because
Mm,
I knew that it wouldn't be too heavy. It wouldn't be too serious. And I literally never in my life pursued a job in mass communications, and I never intended to. But my goal was only walking out of there with a degree in 4 years' time. And that is what I did. That was my focus, though, just checking the box, getting that degree.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, what was like some of the jobs that you had before you realized what your purpose was?
So I worked for the developer. After that, I said, oh, I want to work, I'm in New York. I want to be in fashion. And so I worked at Barney's New York for 3 or 4 years. And that was very interesting. And it turned into like a Devil Wears Prada situation. And then I said, all right, this is not for me. And then I worked at Huffington Post for some time and like the HR part of Huffington Post. And then I also worked as a recruiter at one point in time. That job was horrible. I actually ended up,
Mm.
I never like walked out on a job, and I walked out on that job.
Ooh.
But yeah, it was bad. But it was basically like you were cold calling people across the nation and for like jobs, working on a conveyor belt. And it was just not it was one of those jobs where they were like, oh, you have to make 60 phone calls every hour. And I'm like, what? I'm trying to, surf the internet a little. Like, it was no leeway there. So those were my 4 jobs until I realized, like, I gotta get back to, and honestly, Freddie Gray happened here. And that was a pivotal moment that made me realize, like, my father's company, my father never went to college. And my father at one point, was selling drugs. And so I thought about, and he hires a lot of people who may have a record selling drugs that may not have an opportunity elsewhere. And I thought about it. I said, I could really help my father's company, who is helping people like a Freddie Gray in Baltimore City. And so I came back and started helping my father. But then eventually I was like, I want to work for myself. And then that's when I branched out.
Okay, shout out to your father. He seems like he puts on for the whole block, the whole community.
Yes, he definitely does. And I still work for him now. It's just part-time. It's not full-time. But I'll always work for him in some capacity, for sure.
And like graduating from Virginia State, then you move into Brooklyn. Like, what was some of like the biggest challenges you faced, like right after college, like entering into the real world?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges were just like money management. Like, I didn't know, I was making pretty good money at the time, but in hindsight, like, I racked up so much credit card debt for no reason. If I would have just used cash and paid for things as they came up. And if I couldn't afford it, that means I shouldn't be buying it. I think if I took that approach, that would have helped me. But I think also, like, navigating rent in New York, just the adult problems that you come across, bills, surprise bills that you get where it's like, what? I went to see a doctor, I didn't check my insurance, and now I have a $1,000 out-of-pocket payment because I didn't even know that was in network, out of network. So I think it's just the shell shock of, like, going into adulthood that I don't think anybody could have even really prepared me for it. I think it's one of those growing pains that we all kind of have to go through.
True. That's definitely true. It is a hard thing, and leaving out of college and being like, all right, now I gotta hit the ground running, and then finding out what's the best system, because that's at that point in time you got to develop your own system. You got to develop your own structure and hold yourself accountable. There's no professors, there's no teachers to be like, hey, look, that's what it is. So you gotta really so at that point in time, like, obviously you got your couple of first jobs and companies right out of college, but like, can you tell us about your company, Onyx Development, and like the mission behind it?
Yes. So the mission behind Onyx is to essentially get as many Black people to purchase homes. I'm very transparent that my target audience is African Americans. I was looking up some statistics the other day, and the wealth gap between Black people and white people is just constantly widening. And I think a lot of people don't realize, you think of buying a home, they may think, oh, this is a thing I can have for 30 years. But I think people don't realize the immediate equity and your personal net worth goes up when you purchase a home. And I think people don't realize the borrowing power you have because of your personal net worth going up because of the equity of your home. And so for me, when I bought a home, it really was a game changer for me. And I bought a home before I started Onyx. And then me buying a home is kind of what led to Onyx Development, because I was like, wow, this is the most, this was by far one of the best decisions I've made as an adult. And so again, the mission is to just get, I think also a lot of times, like, even in my family, and, God bless my grandparents' soul, but, a lot of times our grandparents pass away and there is nothing to be left to the younger generation. Whereas a lot of white people pass away, they got a trust, they have some property, they got a life insurance policy. We just don't know what we don't know. And, we're doing the best that we can. But now that I think we have so much information at our fingertips, I think, this generation could really be the one to change things. And they say 43% of your net worth is based off of real estate. And so again, I just want people's net worth to increase.
Mhm.
And one of the easiest way to do that is to buy real estate. So that's the mission of Onyx Development.
Okay, and that's a big mission right there. But I like how you kind of broke that down about like the separation. You know, even though people go when we're living our day-to-day lives, we forget like how big of a separation things really are because you're just kind of like living through the moment, right? But then when you hear stuff like this, I know a lot of the listeners that heard that were like, "Whoa, wait, hold on, is that true?"
Yeah.
So I think that I'm glad you brought that to the light. Now, why are you so passionate about providing families with like affordable rentals with like a pathway for like home ownership? Like, what's the passion behind it? I know you were talking about this a little bit. But like, what is like the drive to keep you doing this?
I think that honestly, I think that like the housing crisis in America is really like a public health issue. And I really believe that the government should be taking on more responsibility. Like a house shouldn't be such a privilege, or even I don't even mean owning a house. I mean just having a nice place to live that someone feels safe, that their heat is on in the winter, that, even if they don't have central air, their air conditioned box works in the summer, and they're not living in like rodent infested or living next to a ton of vacant houses. I just think that it shouldn't be this like American dream. It should be something that's provided to general people. I mean, even the homeless, like we have so many vacant, huge buildings. Like, why shouldn't the government just take that and just put little pods in it or use some shipping containers and create little communities? Like, I personally think the government should be doing more, and they aren't. And so that's kind of where my passion comes from, is to try to provide that gap that's so prevalent.
That and so it's a hard one when you got to be like,
Yeah.
the government could be doing a lot more. We're paying all these
Yeah.
taxes, we're doing all this stuff, but like, there's gonna be a point in time when the voice of the people is gonna be heard, and I feel like
Yep.
individuals like yourself, you speak out in a different way by giving people that type of freedom, that knowledge that they need in order to kind of like get to the next level.
Yeah.
Now, do you like what is some of like the greatest qualities in which you feel like you possess and which you apply every day in your career?
I would say some people do not think this is a good thing, but my ability to multitask, I think, and I think, I have a short attention span. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think for anybody out there whose mind is like racing, a million minutes a day, I think one of the best ways to take advantage of that is so I have a couple real estate clients where I provide support to them for them to, a lot of like local nonprofits are getting into doing houses, and I'll serve as a consultant to help them, finance and construct these houses. And for me having multiple clients, for me, like, working sometimes for my father, for me running my own business, I also work part-time for a nonprofit for Black owned businesses. For me personally, it's hard running a business. And if I tried to rely on my business income solely, I would be broke. But because I have other clients that generate revenue, and because my mind works so, all over the place, it kind of, sometimes I'm overwhelmed, but it also works until I get my business to that level where I can be self-sustained by just my business. So I think for me personally, multitasking, I think also just, having faith in God, like it's so many struggles that come up that if I took it all on, or if I had no kind of faith or no like spiritual grounding, I definitely wouldn't be like doing what I'm doing now.
Okay.
So
I
faith
get
in God, and I think also always being a student, and I think
mm,
less
good.
is
Yeah.
giving back, like giving back to communities, doing volunteer efforts. I do like a back to school drive every summer. I do Christmas drives. I'm hosting a volunteer where we feed the homeless tomorrow. So I just think it's also big to be a servant in your community as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's I like how you said the faith in something else higher than yourself. I feel like that's a
Yeah.
lot of the guests on the show have mentioned that, having faith, because a lot of the work that you guys do, it started off, with a dream, and then, you had to go through that struggle. You still, obviously there's still ups and downs with it, but, to have faith in something larger than yourself.
Exactly.
Um, Now, something that I want to kind of bring up, I know, and I want to say a couple months ago, I recently had the opportunity to interview, Aequo Fund CEO Ernest Valerie, right, a couple months ago.
Hmm.
Could you kind of speak a little bit more about your affiliation with Aequo Fund and like the partnership, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so the Aequo Fund is really dope because they provide capital to developers who are in need. And a lot of times it's like that emerging developer, like right before, because what happens in real estate is if you've never done a project, people are not going to want to lend you money. Every time you go to do an application, and I'm sure it's not just real estate, it's every industry, that when you go to look for funding, but sometimes people are afraid to take a bet and take a chance on people. And so it makes it, it's like the chicken before the egg thing where it's like, well, I can't get experience. You're asking about my experience, but I can't get the experience because no one's providing me capital. And I don't have
Mm-hmm.
a trust, you don't have just money at my fingertips to go do this. And so, him provide the Aequo Fund is basically, they select developers. I met Ernst because of I have a block of 8 houses in Southwest Baltimore, and when he started the Aequo Fund, I guess he was asking around for different developers, and we came across each other. I applied, and I was accepted, and it's definitely been a game changer because another thing with the loan process, it's like a full on cavity search. Like it's long, it's strenuous. It could take 6 months to close on a loan. And with Ernst's program, you don't have all of that red tape kind of thing. So he's really providing access to people that have been disinvested in, which are minorities, women, but specifically also Black people. So it's really been a game changer. So we have 3 properties together. 2 are in Park Heights, Baltimore, and 1 is in Hollands Market, Baltimore. And it's really just been extremely helpful to just have kind of that backing from Ernst because it goes a long way. It definitely goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are some of the projects that you're working on, and how have they helped you?
With Ernst,
Yes.
so yep. So we have 3 total, and all of these houses have been vacant for quite some time. The first house that Ernst and I are doing together, it has no roof on it
Mm.
and had no back of the house. So that house, and it had no floors. So that house was very interesting. And now that house we start drywall tomorrow, pending this inspection that we've been waiting on. But so I think that's like the nature of a lot of the houses in Baltimore. But
Mm-hmm.
it kind of is in my case, it worked to my advantage. A lot of times people are scared, by seeing like houses with holes and things. But
True.
in my
Mm.
case, it worked because I was able to fit in a bedroom and a basement, a bedroom and a bathroom in the basement. Because it didn't have floors, I raised the floors a foot so I could fit that in. Whereas a lot of houses on the block, it's 6 feet tall and you need 7 feet to put in a room and a bathroom. So it kind of worked in my favor, not having any floors and being so dilapidated. And then there's another house on the block that Ernst and I are doing together. And that house is a total shell. Like it doesn't have steps up to it. And when you look in it, it's literally the 4 walls and that's it. But there's no floors in it. It's just like a dark black box. And so we'll go in there, and what's nice about it, we don't have to demo. We can just start straight with like framing. So that's our second project. And then the third project is this 3rd story. It's like I call them the skinny houses. It's one of the skinnier houses. We have, different housing, but Baltimore is such a row house city. Some are very wide and some are very tall. Some are both, and some are really skinny and really short. This one's kind of like a skinny but medium height. So it has 3 stories in it. And that's in a really cool neighborhood called Holland's Market. That's kind of really on the up and up because it's really close to downtown. But it's Baltimore is changing. Like it's a lot more people moving in. It's really interesting to see.
And it seems like you're right on the money with it. We're trying to figure things out and also creating those opportunities for people. Now I know that, at the level where you are, and like you said, Baltimore is like well known for entrepreneurship. I know that as entrepreneurs in general, when you own your own business, there's gonna be those lows and those highs. Like how do you work on the turnaround? Like could you talk about like a moment when you were at your low in your career and like how did you handle it and turn around?
Yeah, I actually reached the lowest point of my career a week ago.
Oh,
Maybe
wow.
it's 2 weeks by now. But what happened was one of my houses, my first completed house. This was on a Saturday. The Sunday, I was doing my first round of tours where I was showing it to some prospective buyers. And that Saturday, I'm on the phone with the contractor like the whole day because we were trying to wrap some stuff up. And then they call me and they're like, their tone is totally different. And I'm like, what is going on? They're like, you have to get over here right now. And I get over there. Long story short, Baltimore City went in and turned some of the water on because they were trying to test something outside. But we didn't have one of the pipes connected for the 3rd floor. I was waiting on a piece. So when they turn the water on, water starts coming from the 3rd floor all the way down to the 1st floor. Yes. And this is like 5 months in, this house, look, it was another crazy bad shaped house. And now it has like, gold accents everywhere and beautiful light fixtures and amazing floors. I mean, everything I picked to the T. And to kind of walk in the day before I had my first set of tours and just see water everywhere, it was tough. It was really tough. But, I don't know. You know how sometimes you feel like certain things are so crazy and so bad that you don't even, it's like, I can't even give this any attention right now. Like, I'm going to do what I have to do on it. But I think I was in shock, honestly. Like, I just was like, I can't even believe this is happening. And I just decided, I said, you know what, let's just clean the water up. I said, I'm still having tours tomorrow. Because it wasn't as bad as maybe I'm making it seem, but there was water coming in from different places. And I just decided to still have the tour. And in hindsight, it's kind of crazy because I remember my father was like, what do you mean you're still doing the tour? And I'm like, I'm still doing it. I'm here now. And so it's kind of like in the face of adversity, like you just got to show up and just be like, you know what? That was really messed up. Like the devil's working hard. I just kept saying the devil's working hard, but I'm working harder. I still got to do what I have to do. And then it was wild because like 3 days after that, I was flying out to Bali. And it's just like, how do I even manage this situation when I'm literally going to be across the world? But I just said, I'm going to go on this trip. And I managed. I mean, I called in like a family member of mine to go be my eyes when I couldn't be there. But I think it's just like the face of adversity. You just got to hunker down. Like, It's like being in a storm. Like they say, like a palm tree, even in like a hurricane, a palm tree is one of the most resilient trees because it'll bend as far as touching the ground, but it doesn't snap. And I think that's the kind of mentality that like we all have to kind of take on, is like, we know things are going to happen, but it's about hunkering down and not folding in times of adversity.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, like that analogy of the palm tree, right? I think that's it's a great way of expressing or understanding like what life is going to throw at you. Like you said, that storm is going to come. Palm trees, they're in tropical weather. There's going to be a storm, but like you said, it doesn't snap. Yes, it might bend, it might touch the ground, but it ain't going to snap.
Exactly.
I think that kind of leads me to the next question. Being in real estate and being like a real estate developer, I know it's being in that field. I know it's like typically known or felt to be like a man's world. Can you speak on like the challenges that you face as a Black woman, working in that type of industry?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's all types of things that I think women have to deal with. Some of them are like, sometimes you don't know if, like I had to make sure I chose contractors that never tried to flirt with me. Like I feel like if you tried to flirt with me, that was like the first sign that this isn't going to work, because that's not, what I'm here to do. Another thing is, I think that, I was saying this earlier today. I think as women, it's important to speak in absolutes to people. Like, I think, sometimes, you don't want to leave room for interpretation for anything. And so I find myself constantly, and I don't mean room interpretation as in, like just about men flirting. I mean, like in terms of business, where like you have your facts standing behind, and someone's trying to tell you something different because they're older, or they have more years in the industry, or because they're just a man who feels entitled in that moment. And so I find myself saying things a lot like, no, that's unacceptable. Or, like I think you just have to be super, super stern, and that's what people will respect. And I think it's also important to stand your ground. I think a lot of times it's important to tell people when you enter like a partnership, or whether you're hiring a person or whether you are finding a contractor or a vendor to work with, I think it's important to set the tone from the beginning of like, here's how I show up, or here's what I expect, or here's what you can expect from me, even. And I think oftentimes we see and we're like, oh, this is a great opportunity, I need to take it. But you still have to do that work and do your vetting, because not every opportunity, is something that needs to be taken without doing your research. And so I think it's important as women, to do our research on a person. Sometimes, you get caught up in like, oh, I got to take this, I got to take it, and it's like, maybe you do have to take it, but maybe you got to communicate clear from the beginning as well. I think that's important. And I think sometimes it's like sometimes I do this thing where like I'll invite my brother to do a walkthrough with me. That way, just in case somebody thinks they're going to try to pull the wool over my eyes, they could see like, oh no, she has a team of people that, that's her brother. Like it's not like that's just some person she paid off the street. But I think sometimes it's important, to have a good support system. And I think sometimes it's important to also tell people, like, if you're uncomfortable saying no to certain things, like I used to do this thing where I would say, oh, I had to talk to my business partner about that. And I wouldn't even have a business partner, but I would act like I'm making a phone call and then come back and be like, they said no, we really can't do it. And it's unfortunate because sometimes I feel like people don't take a woman's word, but it's also like, look, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to stand my ground. And sometimes, I do that business partner move to make that happen.
Now, what is like your long-term goals that you desire when it comes to like Onyx?
Long-term goals. My next thing that I want to do is I want to build an app so I can integrate more technology into this field and into my company. Um, and honestly, it changes. Like my goals kind of change. Like at first, it was like, oh, I want to own 1,000 units. I think that's what I said. And then I started to say, well, maybe I want to become a commercial developer. Maybe I want to be building shopping malls. Maybe I want to, and that kind of changes obviously from the house piece, but it's still integrated because a lot of our, like Baltimore, we have so many like what we call food deserts where it's not a good grocery store around for you to go to. So it's like, it's all tied in, like lack of housing. If you don't have a good thriving neighborhood, you're not going to find grocery stores that say, oh, I want to go into that specific neighborhood. It's like they wait for a neighborhood to come up and then they feel comfortable putting in a grocery store. But sometimes you got to go ahead of that. Like, so I think it changes. Like, but right now it's my next goal, like my immediate goal that I'm working on is definitely like building an app, getting more into technology to help better with my firm.
Okay, well, Ryan, I greatly appreciate you being on the show today and just dropping them gems. I think one of the things that I did pick up was the fact of like community and helping. I think that's something that your father, your parents obviously instilled in you at a young age growing up. Like you said, your father helped out a large community, and then I felt like that's kind of like trickled into like what you do currently right now with your own business, which is
Yeah.
essential. And a lot of times people just don't reach out, and a lot of people reach out to receive help, but to give help is a whole
Yeah.
different thing. And I commend you for that, because to do it every single day, to do it without looking for anything truly in return, but to see someone successful, happy, someone inclining, someone, like you said, creating wealth for their family, their future generations. I think that's essential in life in order for any culture or any individual, a human being, to
Yeah.
kind of keep moving forward. So kudos to you. It's not an easy job. It really is not.
Okay.
And to educate people along the way so that they can make educated decisions in their career path and in their journey. So thank you so much for just being on the show and just expressing all these things and just kind of letting us in a little bit into your world and what you do with your company and like the partnerships that you have. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled that you guys are like showcasing and giving, so many different people and that are trying to do the best that they can, just giving them a platform. So I'm really appreciative of you and I really thank you for this opportunity.
The pleasure is all mine. And I want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Ryan, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect, or follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast.